This episode is brought to you by SteelRoot, a national leader in helping companies meet cybersecurity compliance requirements and prepare for CMMC. Their experienced team of engineers and consultants assist organizations of all sizes to implement and manage IT systems that meet the technical requirements in DFARS and CMMC.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I will be your host. And our guest today is John Chrisley. Hello, John. How are you?
Hi, good morning. Great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Why don't you take a minute to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm with Core Business Solutions, a Pennsylvania-based ISO and security consulting firm. And I've been in the cybersecurity industry now for a good 25 years, helping people with a lot of different compliance areas, everything from HIPAA, PCI, now CMMC and NIST. And so I really like helping, especially small businesses and small and medium businesses. I really like helping people with their cybersecurity challenges because there are a lot of them.
Yeah, that's for sure. And especially the small and medium-sized businesses, they need a little assistance there. So that's great that you're passionate about helping them. So today we are going to talk about incident response, something that a lot of people don't pay much attention to until it's too late. So let's dive into some questions here. So first thing is, can a cyber incident be prevented?
Yeah, you'll hear a lot, you'll read a lot about, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and that is true, but there are a lot of ways that companies can prevent cyber incidents from happening or being as bad if they do happen. And one of it is to understand that it could happen to you, and it may happen to you. I personally have been with a couple of companies in my history that have suffered cyber incidents, and they had large security teams, IT teams, these are big companies, and yet they still got hit or affected. And it can come from anywhere. It could come from outside. It could come from within. And so it's hard to say, can an incident really be prevented? There's a lot of things you can do to keep, the easy stuff from affecting you. We always talk about these foreign countries attacking. Yeah, and there's a lot of ways to keep them at bay the best you possibly can by doing some standard things. But, I've also read and spoke and said, if somebody's really intent on doing harm to your company, they might find a way to do it. And so all you can really do is be ready and kind of have plans. And that's what we're going to talk about today a bit. And just be ready that if something does happen, you're able to respond and react to this and get help when needed. But I will also say, just to end this question, there's a lot of cyber incidents that can be prevented. So there are some best practices and some guidance that I give to my customers that you can really help yourself if you try.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's for sure. Proactive.
Yes.
All right. So what kind of data is typically targeted during a cyber incident?
It's a great question. I don't mean to sound funny, but any kind of data. It's so sad that there's so many people out there or groups, and a lot of these are foreign groups that are just looking for data just to see if they can get it, even if they don't know what they're going to do with it yet. When they get it, they want to see if they can exfiltrate this data. Obviously, personal identifiable information, social security numbers, medical information, credit card information, and the list goes on and on. And obviously, if we're talking about in the CMMC world, in this CMMC, DFARS world, the kind of data that nation states or foreign actors are looking for is information about the secrets that we're trying to keep, right? The plans, the diagrams, the plans, the schematics, the things that we're building our weapons around, our defenses, because maybe that'll give them an advantage. If they learn, they can exfiltrate that. But it's really sad to see that when companies are broken into, there's a lot of kind of data that is usually taken. They will scoop up anything they can get, even if it really wasn't maybe their intention to get it, to see if they can somehow use it later.
Yep, that is definitely a big thing. And I also say too, is that even if they don't know what the data is, if you as a business owner, you lose that data, what is that worth to you that you no longer have access to it if it's a ransomware attack or something like that? So it goes both ways there.
Absolutely.
All right. So what can a business do to prepare for a future cyber incident?
Well, as I said when we first started, one of the first things you can do is to actually accept this, that there are cyber incidents that happen. I don't want anybody out there to think, well, my company's too small, or I don't have any data that anybody would care to take. If they can attack you, they will. And when I say they, who am I talking about again? It could be that infamous hacker with a hoodie that we all read about and see about. It could be a disgruntled employee that is working for you right now, that could really do you harm by taking data, by taking down your systems. There's a lot of different ways you could be affected. So what can you do to prepare? Well, take it seriously and understand that it could happen to you, and start preparing now. If you haven't already done this, if you've never talked to anybody, seek out help and say, look, I want to get prepared. I know that it could be an issue for us. If we suffered a cyber incident, whether our systems all went down, our computers were all locked with ransomware, or our data was stolen, that could be a real big issue for us. So get prepared. And that's what you can do is take it seriously, get some help, and start putting together a plan of how you're going to defend yourself against that future incident that hasn't happened yet. Put a plan together about how you can respond and who you could call. It used to say we'd open up the Rolodex but now it's a virtual. Who do you have on speed dial that you can call when something does happen to you? And I'm serious when I say that. Me personally, I actually have certain federal entities on speed dial that I have met over the years, and through my affiliations with like InfraGard and other great organizations. There are people that I do have on speed dial where if I suffer an incident, or my company does, I at least have somebody that I can reach out and call and ask for advice. That's a great thing to start doing, is start getting this in place.
Yeah, definitely, because time is of the essence. And if you look at two different groups of people, and let's say one has no plan in place, and then the other one does have a plan in place, and something happens, it's like, okay, who do you call? Where's the phone number? Do you have the phone number? Is the phone number locked up in your computer now? Do you have cyber liability insurance? Who do you have to call there? Legally, who are you calling? What are the employees doing while this is all going on? Who's in charge? Do they know what to do? It's all these little things that if you take a team that has put some thought into it beforehand, like you're talking about, versus not having anything right now, it's the Wild West. That's what I always say. If you don't have a plan, it's going to be like the Wild West. So.
Exactly. One thing I'll just tag onto that. I've done a lot of this in my past. It started with me having to do it as a participant, and then later in my vendor career, it's doing this with customers, is tabletop exercises. And I really, really, truly believe in this. If you don't know how to respond, one of the first things that you could do is employ a company to come in and help you through a tabletop exercise. And what I would typically do, it doesn't have to be as scary as it might sound. It really is not. But you just come in and say, okay, look, here's a fictitious example of something that has just happened. Okay, everybody, go. And what do you do next? And you will learn so much. And if you have somebody that can guide you through an exercise like that in a very structured, non-condescending, non-judgmental kind of way, just walk you through and talk through this and document what you have now agreed that you think should be your plan. It can be so useful to be your incident response plan later on.
And I think two things there too is that I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying that if you video recorded these conversations, that would pretty much be the plan. So I said, well, that's actually a good idea. When you're doing these tabletop exercises, record what's happening, so that way later on when you're putting your plan together, if you don't have a plan, it'll help you kind of remember where the holes were with different things. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and I think those exercises are fantastic. And not only asking someone to tell you what would you do, show me what you would do, because it's a very different when it's the whole tell me what to do versus, okay, now show me how you would do that. And then that's where it's like, oh, well, wait a minute here. That person's not here right now, or we can't find that person's phone number, So anyway, I think that's interesting.
Exactly.
All right. So what are the first things a company should do if they are hit with a cyber incident?
Well, you alluded to this in a comment you just made a little while ago. Sometimes you have to think about what are you supposed to be doing. If you have cyber insurance policy in place, which hopefully most everybody does or should have, you might actually have some next steps that you are required to take. You may have a phone number that you are supposed to call. And because if you don't, then your cyber insurance policy may not cover you if you take the wrong steps next. You may need to, for example, use a cyber company that your cyber insurance policy mandates or dictates that you're only allowed to use. And that's usually the way it is with some of these cyber insurance policies. You have to go through the steps of notifying a certain way. And I guess I should actually take a step back and say that you're supposed to do some things very quickly. You're not supposed to wait. How about that? That's one of the first things is don't wait. Don't shove it under the rug. Think that it's going to go away. That could have long-standing ramifications if you delay. Okay. I think immediately get help. Okay, get help. You need to bring somebody to the table that is going to come in with a very level mindset and very calm way to approach this, because one of the first things that happens when a company is hit with any kind of cyber incident, I'm a former emergency management coordinator for a city government, and we dealt with all sorts of incidents, natural disasters as well as cyber incidents, unfortunately. And one of the things that we found was you bring together your core team and people are just very panicked and very stressed. And you need somebody in command who's really going to take command of the incident. And that may not be anybody from inside. That could be an external party that comes in and helps you just calmly determine what are the very next steps. Who do we have to notify right away? Do we need, do we have the expertise to even address this ourselves? Do we need to bring an external company to come in? I used to call it, and I was an incident responder as part of several of my roles. And I would call it that you would parachute me in to help deal with the issue. I don't mean literally. I wasn't jumping off of any airplanes and parachuting in, but sometimes I would fly to the customer's location. This is obviously pre-COVID. COVID really messed things up in this world about how you're going to do this. So you need to think about that as well. But as things are coming out of COVID just a little, maybe around the country, you need to think about who do we need to have here that can help us walk through this. Another big thing that comes into play is preservation. And there's different trains of thought on this. So are you going to turn all the systems off or are you going to leave them on, right? And you need to think about this. It depends on the system and what you need to preserve, because sometimes if you shut off a system, it's going to erase things out of memory, for example. I don't mean to get technical, but if you shut off a system, it could actually erase some of that evidence that could be later needed by a forensic person like myself that needs to come in and actually rebuild this step by step and understand what happened and how did we get here and how do we recover. But there are some systems where maybe the best thing is to turn them off, and you need to have this as part of your plan. You need to organize your people immediately and communicate. Should they continue to do things? Should they not? Should they be? I've been at companies where they sent everybody home. So we're still going to pay you, but everybody just go home because we need to focus as a incident response team, and we don't need anybody trying to get into their email. Your email no longer works. Don't be trying to get into the CRM system or use that piece of machinery because it's no longer going to work until we get things back to a steady state. So these are some of the things that you need to think about as first steps, communication. I think what's also important, I had the pleasure when I worked for a city government to have a public information officer. And so we actually were able to have somebody who was in charge of communication externally to the press at times, internally to the employees, the rank and file, to sort of keep everybody communicated with and let them know what's going on. I think that's an important role, even if it's not an official public information officer. It's important. It could be the owner or the CEO of the company. Somebody has to take point at keeping communications going so that you know where you're at.
KTL is a Microsoft Gold partner and a CMMC registered provider organization. Their professional team members represent a variety of backgrounds and industries that will map out and guide you on your road to CMMC compliance. The process starts with a dedicated team of CMMC registered practitioners, understand your specific requirements, and are here to help every step of the way. KTL Solutions, delivering tailored solutions so you get the most out of your technology. Visit them today at ktlsolutions.com.
Because there is going to be some kind of reputational damage, and however you can mitigate that, the better off you're going to be. So you have to think about that, because there's no way around that in this kind of a situation. So the more you can control the message and get your arms around it until you know what your final message is going to be, the less damage is going to be done.
Absolutely.
All right. So who can a company contact to help with a cyber incident response?
Yeah, so you got to be really careful with this topic, because there are companies out there that specialize in this, and then there are companies that don't. But if you call them, they'll be like, sure, I'll take your money and I'll try to help you, but maybe you're going to be their first customer that they're going to go through this with. And so you want to find a company that does this. There are some, I don't want to mention them by name right now to try to promote any other vendors, but if anybody were to contact me, I do know companies that they specialize in cyber incident response. They will come in and they will put that fire out and get you back to normal, operating as best as possible. And they will help you through all the things. Now, again, if you have a cyber insurance policy, you may be mandated to call a certain company. And some of those companies are the companies that I would recommend calling, because that's why the insurance companies have them as mandated companies to use. It's not that you can't call anybody you want to call, but if you expect your insurance policy to cover, you have to follow those kind of rules. So my most important guidance here is, please make sure you call a company that specializes in this. Your typical managed IT company, even some of the managed IT security companies, that may not be exactly who you want to call in your darkest moment, when you're in the middle of your systems are down, you have ransomware, you just had an employee walk out the door with all your data. You need to call a specialist who knows, and they've been there, they've done that. They can come to the table prepared and just have a game plan ready to go.
Yeah, and the insurance company is definitely going to vet whoever they're listing as the response team, because this is their money too that they're playing with here. So they're going to make sure that they're dealing with somebody who knows what they're talking about. So that's a good point. And another good thing is to ask your MSP, if you're a small business owner, medium business owner, ask them, if something does happen, what do you do? What's your role in this? And see what their response is. So at least you know ahead of time what to expect. If you just assume they're going to take care of it, and then all of a sudden something happens, and then they say, well, we don't do that, or well, we can try, like you said. That's not what you want to hear in that time.
Absolutely.
Anyway, all right. So who should be involved with responding to a cyber incident?
Yeah, I was going to tack this on, but to the last thing, but I knew this question was coming up, so I wondered who should be involved. I mean, it really depends, right? But think about this for a moment. Most companies are going to think, well, my IT person, right? Well, what if your IT person is actually involved in the incident, caused the incident, took the data? I can't tell you how many times in my lengthy career I've heard about the IT people being the people that stole all the data. They were disgruntled, right? They had all the keys to the kingdom. They had all the access. They had the privileged access, the root or admin, credentials, and it was discovered that they took all the data. Now, what do you do? Who do you involve now? You can't involve them. They're a subject of what the future investigation. So who do you involve is what should be determined in part of the planning. I just talked about external companies, the right company, the right person to come in and put their arm virtually around you and help you through this, because it's a really stressful and dark time. I've seen a lot of people just completely get overwhelmed during an incident, and those are the people you don't want in the room, honestly. Mm-hmm. You want them out of the room so that you can think clearly about this. So who should be involved? I want to think organizationally, and maybe not every company has all these kind of resources at their disposal, but I think about your legal resources, right? Your attorney, and sometimes even you have an attorney that is on contract, and maybe they're not experienced in this kind of thing either. So you want to think about, who could I call? What kind of legal, because you're going to want to be guided as to what you do next. What do you say? There are a lot of, we'll talk about this here in a moment about notification requirements, but there are requirements, a lot of requirements about notification, but your legal counsel should be there helping you determine when and how, because a lot of times, maybe your IT person says, well, I think we ought to do, and we ought to, release this and put this, well, maybe that's not exactly the right way to go. That actually could be very damaging. You got to be very, very careful. Should law enforcement be involved? Okay, I've either fortunately or unfortunately had to have law enforcement involved in a lot of incidents that I've either been a victim of or been helping a customer through. And sometimes law enforcement could be one of the very best calls you could make, because they're there and they bring their expertise and their groups to the table. It could be something where your local police department maybe will say, hey, this is not for us. This is actually higher. It's a county, it's a state, it's a federal type of issue. And so you bring those resources to the table, and they partner with you. They really do. Sometimes you should not be afraid of those resources, because sometimes they can really help you. But one thing I do want to stress here is make sure that anybody that you do need at the table is not excusing themselves because they don't want to partake. That's also another big thing. You may have department leaders or parts of the company that they say, I want nothing to do with that. That has nothing to do with me. Well, maybe I do need you at the table. Maybe I need somebody to take notes, a scribe. I need somebody to handle communication with the employees. I need somebody to man a phone. I need, somebody to do something. And so don't let anybody off the hook if you need them. This is why it's also good. I'm a very, very big study through the Homeland Security trainings of incident response and incident preparation, right? Having worked in city government, it's very important to put your team together ahead of time so that they know their roles, what seats you're going to ask them to be in during an incident. And so, again, that's all part of this preparation and getting ready for what could come.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If everybody knows what they're going to be responsible for ahead of time, it's a lot better than, hey, you, can you go do this? Hey, you, can you go do this? No, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to be involved in this.
Exactly.
All right. Now, this is what you just kind of started to touch on. But as far as who needs to be notified, and like you mentioned, some people do need to be notified. So who would you say needs to be notified when they do suffer an incident?
So, I want to start with, in the context of NIST, CMMC, DFARS area, who needs to be notified. And there are some rules. There are some rules that subcontractors and have to respond to and abide by. And I believe in layman's terms, the way this rule is written is if you have a cyber incident, you have a responsibility to notify the next highest supplier, if you will, whoever's giving you your orders, whoever you're working for. And sometimes you could consider them to be your customer. But other times, what about your customers, right? So you need to really think through this. Who, and this also goes into planning, and this should be just well defined. If there happens to be an incident, we know based on the type of data that was taken, if we know, then we understand who we have to notify. It could be back through the government, right? They may have some reporting requirements and a portal that you have to go to and actually report that incident to them if their kind of data was taken. And so you really need to look at that very carefully, but also think about what we said in the very beginning of this webcast was, well, it depends on what kind of data. And sometimes a hacker or malware will come in and take all the data. So what am I talking about here? Well, they may come in and take your payroll data, your HR data, your employees, own, personal identifiable information. Now, what kind of reporting responsibilities do you have? Well, it really depends. And I will tell you that most every state in the U.S. has their own individual mandate about, incident reporting. I'm going to use some examples just off the top of my head because they're easy to refer to. New York has, DFS. They have, incident reporting guidelines, and they have a list of, okay, here's all the type of data, and if any of this data is taken on New York citizens, well, you need to think to yourself, do you have any data on New York citizens in any of your company? Your email, your HR database, were they applicants? Are they employees? Are they contractors? Are they customers? There's a lot that goes into this. Now, you could almost use this same scenario across any state in the US. And you need to understand that there may be state reporting requirements based on the kind of data that was taken. I know, I come from healthcare as a big background of mine. Obviously, in healthcare, there's a list of identifiers. And if these things are taken, you have timelines, you have reporting guidelines, you have to make notice, you may have to notify the affected, well, in healthcare, it's called the patient. If we're talking about CMMC, it could be the customer or the supplier and or the government that you have these requirements. And so you really need to think about these ahead of time, as we talked about with planning. And the one thing I also want to really stress here before we leave this topic is think about your employees, because a lot of companies don't, unfortunately. If their data is taken during a hacking event or a breach of data, they should be just as important to you as anybody else. And they have to be handled, carefully, right? They're your trusted employees. So if your systems are hacked or exfiltrated, even if it's just email, you need to think about, well, wait a minute, what was in my email? What's in the corporate email? What's in the HR system? What's in QuickBooks or Quicken or any of these systems that we're using, CRM systems to take care of our company? And are my employees affected as well? And maybe, again, this comes down to that communication. You may have to start communicating with them, if not even in a formal way. A lot of companies, it's sort of, I guess, I don't want to call it a golden rule. I'll be tagged later if I do call it that. But sort of what I've seen in cyber incident response is immediate notification as quickly as possible, and the offer of credit monitoring. Okay, that's almost the way that companies say, look, this is what we're doing. We're immediately notifying, we're offering you a year of credit monitoring, and then they back off and say, we've done what we need to do. I personally don't think that's even near enough, but you know what? It's better than nothing, and it's better than the alternative for sure.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I just want to throw out there too is that we have to remember, if something does happen and one of your clients says to you, well, what were you doing before this to protect this information? Think about how you're going to answer that question, because you can't rewind time and go back and put a plan together and to say to them, well, we really didn't have, too much together, or we had, even if you tried to make it sound like something, and if you really weren't doing it, it's not a good business practice. So at the end of the day, that's really what this is. So just think about that too, having to deal with that answer.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you very, very much for your time, John. I really, really appreciate this and all your expertise. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to be here, and hopefully the advice was useful to somebody. And I really look forward to hearing from anybody that needs to talk about any of this more. Reach out to me, and be happy to talk about this and anything else around cyber that anybody wants to talk about. So thank you again for having me.
You're very, very welcome. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And we hope to see you on the next episode. So until then, take care. Bye-bye.